Wanted to respond to Pea Party's video Death Penalty for Everyone, and I wanted to start off by apologizing for my so-called generalization, which was not directed at Americans in general, but directed at the few dozen American YouTubers who, in my opinion, posted some very ignorant video responses to the Philip DeFranco video. These people didn't do their research, and I didn't make my point very clear, so I apologize to anyone I might have offended. Pea Party was right in pointing out that the decline of homicide rates in Canada is not necessarily the direct result of the fact that the death penalty has been abolished. At the same time, I don't think that keeping the death penalty instated would be any more effective than having it removed. U.S. crime rates are still 4 times higher than Canadian crime rates, and 5 times higher than European crime rates. So it's probably more an issue of some much-needed social changes than a question of whether the death penalty should be kept instated or removed. Whether you look at the costs of capital punishment as being a problem with capital punishment in general, or simply being a problem with the administration of capital punishment, it's still a problem. It would obviously be faster and cheaper to just buy a bullet and shoot the guy in the head, but in a 21st century Western society, it's a little more complicated than that. Everyone gets a fair trial, and like Pea Party said, if you're sitting on death row for 20 years, 8 years, even 10 years, whatever, taxpayers' money is not only going towards housing and feeding expenses, it's also going towards all the legal fees that need to be paid to get this guy to court, defend his case, and so on. That can cost tens of millions of dollars, and I think that the cost of keeping a person in jail for a 25 to life sentence in Canada is somewhere between $400,000 and $600,000 per case, not per year. I don't agree with what Pea Party said about capital punishment not being a deterrent. I think it's very much a deterrent because, for one, it demonstrates to the criminal that crime doesn't pay, and 2, it serves as an example for the rest of society because it shows people this is what'll happen to you if you do what that guy did. Pea Party said that the purpose of capital punishment is to cleanse society. Canada's life sentence serves exactly the same purpose. If a guy like Vince Lee were put in jail, he'd be spending 23 hours out of every day sitting in a maximum security prison cell, not only for the safety of the rest of society, but for his own safety. I mean, what do you think would happen if the other inmates got a hold of this guy, or he was released back into society? You remember what happened to Jeff Dahmer? In Canada, anybody serving a life sentence who would be deemed too dangerous to be released back into society would not be granted parole. And if they were granted parole, they'd have to go through an intensive rehabilitation program first, and then they'd be monitored like crazy to make sure that they didn't reoffend. And if Vince Lee ends up pulling the insanity card, then he'll probably spend the rest of his life in some kind of a psychiatric facility. I personally don't agree with this sort of an eye for an eye retributive justice principle. 2 wrongs don't make a right, and what happened to Tim McLean was absolutely horrific. But executing a murderer won't bring back the victim. Would executing a killer make the victim's loved ones feel any better? I don't know, but I don't assume that it would, because it still wouldn't bring them back. A dangerous criminal is still faced with the unpleasant consequences of prison life. They might be attacked or even killed by another inmate, or they could be faced with a lifetime of solitary confinement, which is enough to make anybody lose their mind. Oftentimes, inmates just end up committing suicide. Another reason I disagree with the death penalty is because a wrongful conviction could lead to the execution of an innocent person. And this is obviously not something that happens all the time, but it has happened. If a person is living in a state or country where the death penalty isn't practiced and they are wrongfully convicted, at least they can be released back into society and compensated for legal fees, psychological damage, damage to reputation, so on. If you're wrongfully convicted for a crime and executed, well, you know, neither case is very much fun, but I think I'd prefer the former. Lastly, I'm not going to address Pea Party's comments about the afterlife and going to hell, because for one, this isn't a religious topic, it's a legal topic, and two, hell is only for people who believe in it.